Hey there, Virgo. I am doing a reading for you. These are timeless readings for really whoever finds it, but I am titling it a Virgo reading, thinking of it from that perspective. So thanks for joining me. Let's see what's going on.
Someone wants to have that conversation with you, don't they? The real one, the vulnerable one. The one where they finally say the things they've been holding back, where they stop hiding behind surface level small talk and actually show you what's been happening inside them. You can feel it building. That energy of someone gathering courage, rehearsing words, working themselves up to reach out in a way they haven't before. But here's what's different this time: you're not waiting for it anymore. You're not sitting by your phone hoping they'll finally come through. You're not arranging your life around the possibility of their honesty. You've moved on, or you're in the process of moving on, and now their timing, now their sudden readiness to be real with you is landing in a completely different energetic space than it would have even a few weeks ago. Stay with me, because what's coming through about this impending conversation and where you actually are in your own journey might reveal exactly why the universe has orchestrated things this way. Let me tell you what I'm sensing in the energy right now. The first thing that's coming through is this sense of roles reversing. You might have spent considerable time wanting exactly this, wanting this person to open up, to be honest, to have a real conversation with you about what exists between you and where it's actually going. You might have created countless opportunities for depth, for truth, for authentic connection, and what you got back was surface. You got deflection. You got just enough to keep you engaged, but never enough to give you clarity or security or the real intimacy you were seeking. Here's what you might be experiencing now. You're noticing that this person's energy is shifting. They might be showing signs of wanting to communicate differently, of being ready to go deeper, of finally being prepared to have that heart to heart you used to crave. But something in you has changed. The urgency is gone. The hope that used to spike every time you sensed movement from them, it's been replaced by something quieter, something more self contained, something that looks a lot like peace. What's emerging in the energy is that you've been doing your own internal work while this person was in their head deciding whether to be brave enough to be real with you. You've been processing, grieving, releasing, moving through the stages of accepting that someone's potential doesn't equal their reality. And in that process, you've started to build a life, an identity, an emotional landscape that doesn't revolve around this person finally choosing you or finally being honest or finally showing up the way you deserved all along. This reflection invites you to consider who you've become in the space where you stopped waiting for someone else to give you what you needed, and whether that version of you still wants what this person might finally be ready to offer. You might be wondering what changed for them. Why now? Why are they suddenly ready to have this conversation after all the times you made it clear you were available for exactly that? What I'm picking up on is that some people only value transparency when they sense they're losing control of the narrative. When you were accessible, when your feelings were obvious, when your availability was predictable, there was no urgency for them to be vulnerable. They had the luxury of keeping things vague because they knew you weren't going anywhere. But now you're moving on. Now your energy is shifting away from them. Now they're sensing that the window they've been keeping open might actually close, and that's activating something in them. Not necessarily authentic growth or readiness, but the fear of loss. The panic that comes when someone realizes they took something for granted that they can't take for granted anymore. What's interesting about this particular energy is that you might find yourself in a position where you're genuinely curious about what this person wants to say, but you're not desperate to hear it. There's a difference there. The old version of you would have dropped everything for this conversation, would have made yourself immediately available, would have hoped that this was finally the moment where everything shifts and becomes clear, and this person proves they're capable of the depth you always knew they had. But the current version of you is more discerning. You might be noticing that you're able to observe this person's desire to talk without making it mean anything about you, without interpreting it as validation that you were right to wait or as proof that they've finally seen your worth. You're able to hold it more neutrally as information about where they are in their process, not as a statement about your value or your future. What's coming through is that this conversation they want to have might be sincere. This person might genuinely be ready to be more honest, more vulnerable, more direct about their feelings or their fears or their intentions. But sincerity doesn't automatically equal alignment with what you actually need right now. Someone can be ready to have a real conversation and still not be ready to offer you a real relationship. They can be honest about their feelings and still not be capable of consistent action that matches those feelings. And you've learned that distinction the hard way. This reflection invites you to consider what you would actually need to hear in this conversation to consider re engaging, and whether you believe this person is capable of backing up their words with sustained changed behavior. You might be feeling protective of the peace you've built, and that's wise. You've worked hard to get to this place where you're not consumed by what this person thinks or feels or might finally be ready to admit. You've created distance, you've redirected your energy, you've started to invest in yourself and in possibilities that don't require you to wait or wonder or tolerate ambiguity. And opening yourself back up to this person's energy, even for a conversation, could disrupt that peace. What I'm picking up on is that you have a choice here that you didn't have before. Before, you would have said yes to this conversation automatically because you wanted it so badly. But now you get to decide consciously. You get to ask yourself, does having this conversation serve me? Does it align with where I'm heading? Does it honor the growth I've experienced and the boundaries I've set? Or does it pull me back into a dynamic I've been working to free myself from? The energy for this month is showing that if this conversation does happen, you're entering it from a completely different power position than you would have previously. You're not entering as someone who needs their validation or their clarity or their commitment. You're entering, if you choose to enter at all, as someone who's already whole, who already has peace, who already knows their worth, and who's simply curious about what someone else has to say without needing it to change your trajectory. What's also coming through is that this person might be surprised by the version of you they encounter if they do reach out for this heart to heart. They might be expecting the version of you who was waiting, hoping, making yourself available. They might be expecting that their willingness to finally be real will be received with gratitude or relief. But what they're going to encounter instead is someone who's moved on or is genuinely in the process of moving on, and that might be disorienting for them. This reflection invites you to consider whether you're ready to hold your ground, if this person's honesty is compelling, but their readiness for action still lags behind their words. Um, There's also this element of timing that feels significant. This person wanting to talk now when you're moving on isn't coincidence. It's often how these things unfold. People sense shifts in energy even when nothing has been explicitly communicated. They feel when someone who was always available starts to withdraw their availability, and that shift activates urgency that wasn't there before. What I'm sensing is that you don't owe this person this conversation just because they're finally ready for it. You don't have to make yourself available for someone else's timeline of emotional readiness, especially if that timeline has repeatedly disregarded your own. If you choose to have this conversation, it should be because you genuinely want to, because you believe it serves your highest good, because you're curious from a grounded place, not because you feel obligated or because some part of you is still hoping they'll say the magic words that make everything okay. The energy is showing that whatever this person wants to express has been building for a while. They might have things to confess, to clarify, to apologize for. They might want to explain their behavior, their distance, their inconsistency. They might even be ready to express feelings they've been holding back. And all of that might be genuine, but genuine doesn't mean it's enough. Genuine doesn't mean it changes the pattern of how they've shown up. Genuine doesn't mean you have to reopen a door you've been working so hard to close. What's important for you to remember is that words are easy. Vulnerability in a single conversation is relatively low risk compared to sustained vulnerability in an ongoing relationship. This person might be ready to have one honest talk, but that doesn't automatically mean they're ready to be consistently honest, consistently available, consistently choosing you in the way you deserve. And you've learned to pay more attention to patterns than to moments. You might be feeling conflicted. Part of you might want to hear what they have to say. Part of you might be curious if they've actually grown or changed or developed the capacity for the depth you always wanted from them. But another part of you might be tired of the emotional labor of navigating someone else's journey toward readiness is less than #0. 5# is greater than tired of being the one who has to decide whether someone's latest version of honesty is worth reinvesting in. What's coming through is that you're allowed to protect what you've built. You're allowed to prioritize your peace over someone else's need for closure or confession or connection. You're allowed to say no to conversations that might disrupt your forward momentum, even if those conversations are sincere. You're allowed to recognize that just because someone is finally ready to be real with you doesn't mean you're still in a place where their reality matters to your path. And that's not cruel. That's self-preservation. This reflection invites you to consider what you're protecting by maintaining the boundary of moving on, and whether anything this person could say would be worth potentially compromising that protection. So as you navigate this, pay attention to your body. Pay attention to how you feel when you think about engaging in this conversation. Does it bring excitement or dread? Genuine openness or obligation? Are you curious from a place of strength, or are you being pulled back by old patterns of hope that have disappointed you before? And trust what you sense. Trust that you've earned this distance. Trust that moving on isn't something you have to abandon just because someone finally wants to talk. Their readiness doesn't obligate you to anything. You get to choose yourself first. You get to keep moving forward. And if that means their heart to heart happens without you, that's their lesson to sit with, not your responsibility to fix.